So good morning, everyone. Welcome to this Workforce Wednesday webinar. My name is Kirsten Bayer, and I'm with the Illinois Center for Specialized Professional Support at Illinois State University. I will be on for technical support and moderating. Today's webinar is reconciliation of budgeted to actual costs, and we are joined by KEB representatives Tanya Fry and Benton McCarthy. Before we hand it off to them, I'm going to do some housekeeping items. So we are on Zoom webinar, not Zoom meeting, and it is a different platform. So as an attendee, you do not have the capability to turn on your camera or turn on your microphone, but we will have an opportunity towards the end of the session for Q&A. And during that, if you would like to raise your virtual Zoom hand, which is located on your Zoom toolbar, we can unmute you if you would like to ask a question live. You can also ask questions in the chat. Let me go ahead and make sure that everyone can participate in the chat because sometimes Zoom webinar changes the settings on me. So everyone should be able to type in the chat now if you'd like to say good morning. And you can also type questions or comments in the Q&A, and then I will help Tanya and Benton kind of answer those as needed. Today's session is recorded, so we will have the recording posted on Illinois WorkNet as well as the Illinois Workforce Academy website, which we control, and I will put the links to both of those in the chat, but the links will also be in a follow-up email tomorrow that you will receive from Zoom webinar, which will have the URLs where you can access the recording and today's presentation slides, as well as any resources related to today's session. And then it will also have a follow-up survey that the WIOA Professional Development Committee puts out with every webinar. We do appreciate your participation in this survey. I know sometimes surveys can be redundant, but we do actually look at the feedback. I am on the WIOA Professional Development Committee, and I relate that feedback to the committee so we can help us plan for future professional development and also know if we are meeting the system's needs. So please let us know that. We also have closed captioning on today for accessibility reasons or note-taking purposes, so feel free to utilize that accessibility feature. And see a lot of people are typing good morning in the chat, so good morning. Really quickly, we're going to do our beginning polls, but they're going to be a little bit different today. So the first poll that we want to do is just where are you located today? So where is your local area? So if you could answer that poll for us, and then we'll move on to the next one. This is just for general WIOA professional development polling. So if you're joining us from Chicago, Northern Illinois, Central, or Southern. All right, everybody already answered that really quickly. Thank you. So we'll share the results. Looks like we have a good mix spread across the state, which is awesome. The next poll we're going to do is which LWIA are you from? So this is actually a short answer. You should be able to type the number or LWIA area. So go ahead and type that into the short answer. Which LWIA are you from? We'll give everyone some time to answer that. If you're on the call and you're not from an LWIA, you can just put which title you're from or which entity within the state that you're from, if you're another state or local workforce innovation board member. It's short answer, so open-ended, so feel free to type what is necessary. We still are waiting on some people, so we'll give everyone a couple more minutes or a couple more seconds. Okay, I'll go ahead and end that. And then I'm not going to share the results just because that is just for Tanya and Benton. So we'll be able to get that report out to them. And then we also would like to know this morning, who is your reconciliation contact? So if you could provide that for us, their name, their email, definitely, if you have that available to you. And then if possible, their phone number. Again, this is short answers, so you should be able to type it. And if you don't have the chance to get this poll answered, you need to look up who the contact is, etc. you can feel free to type it in the chat later on during the session. But if you have that information readily available to you, if you could type it in this poll, that way we just have all your answers in one place, that would be appreciated. So who is the reconciliation contact? Their name and email, if possible. We'll give everyone a couple minutes to do this one just in case you need to locate that person's email in your email. Have a chance to enter that information, you can feel free to just type it in the chat. And then the last poll that we want to just know really quickly is, when do you do your reconciliation? So annually or quarterly? And this is a multiple choice poll. So feel free to select that. When do you do your reconciliation, annual or quarterly? We'll give everyone a couple more seconds to answer this. Oh, someone posted in the chat that they do biannually. That's okay, that it's not a choice, Kathy, but thank you for typing in the chat. We appreciate that. If anyone else does it biannually, you can just type that in the chat and we'll pull that date, or we'll pull the chat too for the webinar. Thank you, Debbie. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and end that. We can share the results for this one if we want to. So we have one person who said annually and then 9 people who said quarterly. And then we had the 2 people in the chat that said biannually as well. And we will get all of that information to you, Tanya and Benton. I will go ahead and stop speaking now, and I will hand it off to Tanya and Benton to start their presentation. If anyone needs anything during the webinar, feel free to reach out to me and I'd be happy to assist you.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. This is the reconciliation of budgeted to actual costs, and the webinar is a refresher of the handbook for reconciliation. You will see after this session is over, later on this afternoon, you're going to see the new budgeted cost reconciliation spreadsheets and everything on the WIOA page, the resource page. So everything's been updated. Probably, I'd say the last time everything was put out there was back in 2017. So we went through it as a group and made some changes and felt that it would be good to start doing this training. And it's something that we might start putting out there as an option to do annually. Today, we will describe what the handbook is, explain the performing reconciliation and the invoicing. And just a little bit of background, the one-stop operating budget must be periodically reconciled against actual cost incurred and adjusted accordingly. Those budgeted actual costs must be reconciled for both infrastructure and local service delivery. And the purpose of the reconciliation is to ensure that the one-stop operating budget reflects a cost allocation practice that demonstrates how the infrastructure costs are charged to each partner. The reconciliation frequency and timeline is semi-annually or quarterly. So you can do that reconciliation on December 31st and June 30th, or you can have the option of doing them quarterly, which is September, March, December, and June. And then we have a sample timeline here for you to go through. And on the sample timeline, it kind of shows you just the process of how to do that reconciliation. So after each, and this is basically for the semi-annual process. So if it was December 31st that you were doing your reconciliation for, within 20 days, the actual cost for that reconciliation period compiled should be the individual responsible person for reconciliation should have all of that compiled together. By the 25th day, the reconciliation person would then share the actual cost for the reconciliation period. And then when you hit that 30 days, that's when the person responsible for reconciliation would issue the notices to those required partners with any additional amounts that would be owed within 30 days of the notice. And then within 60 days is when the required partners would be paying those additional amounts owed per notice. So let's get into the process just a little bit more. The steps for determining frequency and identifying the individual responsible for reconciliation is not intended to require a full board and vote. The local workforce board chair role is in doing both of those steps is to ensure that the board has involvement. So the local board chair determines the frequency. Then the local board chair identifies the person that's doing the reconciliation. Then that individual responsible for reconciliation develops a process to identify those actual costs at the end of each reconciliation period. As we're going through this process, we're going to give you some recommendations on how you can do it. But of course, as long as you're doing it at least semi-annually as it's required, and you're providing notices to those partners, you can do that in any which way you choose. So when we go through these are just recommended ways that you could do it. And then all of these examples are going to be on that WIOA resource page for you to go and pull and use. Now let's identify the actual cost that's incurred during the reconciliation period. So you're going to use the sample matrix that we're going to show here in a little bit for tracking the actual cost incurred by the partner. Then you're going to identify the partner that's incurring that cost on each line item, and then confirm with that partner the actual cost incurred for each line item. And then you're going to enter the sum of the actual cost incurred into the reconciliation spreadsheet. Now, these steps here are easy to put into a presentation and then expect everyone to go back and go, oh, this should be pretty simple. Well, we're going to have the actual reconciliation that we're going to show to you on this presentation as well, and show you how to get the exact information on how you can do those reconciliations. So in addition, there is a difference between large variations, which require a full budget amendment, versus smaller variances that can be handled through the reconciliation process. So we're going to talk quite a bit about that as we're going through as well. So this is where the threshold is the 15% and the budgeted amount of 10%. Sometimes that can get confusing to understand what that means. So one example is that if signage is going to come in a lot more expensive than the original budgeted amount, that's going to affect all partners contributing toward the infrastructure cost. That requires a budget amendment because the individual line item increased by more than 15%, and that accounts for 10% of the total MOU budget. So that would require the MOU budget amendment and new signatures from all partners. Another example of a variance is for utilities that would be less than 15% of the budgeted amount. So that can be handled through the reconciliation process and does not require a full budget amendment. These are special circumstances, and we'll describe more of that in a few minutes. Before you identify the actual costs incurred, there's two steps first. The individual responsible for reconciliation takes these two steps. So you're going to identify the benefits received by each required partner that shares those costs in that local area. And again, you're going to use that sample matrix that we talked about. Then you're going to identify each required partner's FTE commitment made in the original MOU and budget. For reconciliation purposes, the original FTE commitments, that's what's made by each partner at the effective date of the MOU and remains the basis of the adjusting the required partners share during that entire reconciliation. A change in the partner's FTE commitment anytime in the program year would also require an amendment to the MOU and budget with new partner approval and signatures. So here's the, as we talk about the reconciliation spreadsheet, and you're going to see the spreadsheet on the WIOA page, resource page that you can go back to and review. Each one of these screens that we're going to show you today is going to be a tab within that reconciliation spreadsheet. So this is the first tab, and what this tab here is going to tell you is just the instructions on how to follow each one of the tabs all the way through to just give you helpful information on how to actually do the reconciliation. And there's going to be the option through there to do it semi-annually or to do it quarterly. You'll be able to follow those instructions all the way through. There's going to be, not only are you going to have the semi and quarterly annual tab, you're going to have the benefits received, tracking the actual cost, an invoice example, and we're going to go through each one of those. But again, what you're seeing right here is that first tab. The annual and quarterly reconciliation tab looks exactly the same, except one just is annual and one is quarterly. You'll need to have one of these for each one of the partners. And again, as you're going through this, you can reflect back to the first tab to give you explanations on how to fill each of it out. But as you can see, to make it a little bit easier, this yellow fields here, these are the areas that you're going to fill in. And the reason the budgeted FTEs is all yellow across the bottom here is you can add in the FTEs for each one of those partners, and depending which one you're doing the invoice for is who you would send that to. And then also the individual that is responsible for reconciliation is going to compile the matrix and then send it out to the partners to review and also approve. And there's two types of benefits. The basic benefits, those are measurable and include office space, access to copiers, security services, cleaning services, insurance, technology, high-speed internet, things like that. Your programmatic benefits, those are going to reflect real or potential benefits to enhance program services. These could include potential increased referrals, improved coordination of services, customer convenience to access co-located services, opportunities for cross-trained staff, potential streamlined intake process, and improved business services. So you'll see those as you're filling this out as well. And the individual responsible for reconciliation customize this matrix to the local area and can edit the benefits received in each one of these categories. And again, this matrix is also available on the WIOA implementation page. This matrix is intended to help show the basic information that you'll need to plug into the reconciliation spreadsheet. So you're going to identify the costs incurred during the reconciliation period. You'll use the sample matrix for tracking actual costs incurred by the partners. That's identifying the cost that's incurred, confirm with the partner again, the actual costs incurred, and then enter the sum of this into the reconciliation spreadsheet. So as you can see, the infrastructure and the shared service delivery are two, one is at the top and one is on the lower part here. And then the next screen that we're going to review is going to be the reconciliation invoice option. And I'm sorry, this is not switching over here. There you go. Okay. On here, this is where you can, and again, this is just an example. You can, all of these things that I'm going to go through 1 through 5 should be on any kind of invoice that you're giving to any of the partners, but it can be in any format that you choose to put it in. This is the format that's going to be on the reconciliation spreadsheet, and it's going to be in one of the tabs. But again, you can create your own. So one of the first things that's required to be on here, and you'll see it's numbered right here, is going to be the name and the LBN number. And then of course you need to, on the second one, is give them the period the invoice is for. So they need to know the dates that they're being, what they're receiving this invoice for. Then identify the reimbursement separately for infrastructure and the shared delivery costs. So those should be separated on here. So those are clearly understood. This is the total infrastructure. This is going to be the total service delivery. Then include the net amount to be paid after factoring any offset contributions. So you're going to see that over here, this net amount, number 4. So these numbers, as you get this presentation sent out to you in this recording, you'll see that these numbers on the left side will then correspond to the numbers on the right. So whether you use this one or you create your own, you'll be able to see what the net effect of each one of these is doing. So this here is going to be the net amount that would be owed after any other type of offsetting contributions. Then the 5th one here is agreed upon MOU and its effective date. So you want to make sure that you're putting the MOU effective date down here as well. So whomever is getting invoiced understands this is the MOU period that they're being charged for or receiving this invoice for. Those that invoice actual costs monthly would not need to complete a reconciliation. So what would happen is the budget actual would show where the partner is as they pay monthly. So it's going to show as it goes through. There's not a lot that invoice monthly, but some do. And you can invoice however you choose to do that. So then you're going to reconcile your costs per center. And you'll note that you are only reconciling those budgeted costs for that reconciliation point, period. You can only enter the budgeted amount applicable to that reconciliation period. So only 6 months of that total budget. So instead of putting the whole plan year on there for that budget, if you're reconciling for that 6 months, make sure you have, half the budget that would be when you're doing the actual charges on there versus the budgeted. You do not enter the total budget amount of that reconciliation. That would cause the variances to be very, very large. If a budget amendment occurred before December 31st, then you will compare the actual costs incurred against the amended budget amount. If a budget amendment occurred after 12/31, then you will compare the actual costs incurred against the original approved budgeted amount. And these are just some examples of some special circumstances that come across. And again, these are going to be out on that resource page as well. It's easy to not remember these special circumstances for things that don't happen very often. There are 3 questions to ask about each line item and item in a variance. Is the variance going to be 15% of the original budget amount and 10% of the total budgeted amount? If yes, then it exceeds the threshold. So just like that example earlier on the signage, if the signage comes in at $10,000 more than the budgeted amount, that exceeds the 15% of the variance, and it accounts for more than 10% of the total budget. That's going to help you decide how that would be handled. And then again, is the variance permanent? If yes, then the MOU and budget amendment is required. So if the signage is one time, permanent increase, that will be required every partner to pay more. Is the variance temporary or seasonal? If yes, then it can be handled through the reconciliation process. So again, the cost of natural gas and utilities increase for the winter equals seasonal. Those costs will go back down when it warms up, so you can handle that through the reconciliation process. It should even out throughout the year. So that just gives you a little bit of an explanation all the way through. And of course, if a required partner disagrees with the reconciliation or budgeted amendment, the required partner should provide written notification within 15 days of that final reconciliation notice to the individual responsible for reconciling, explaining their rationale for disagreement or non-payment. The individual responsible for that reconciliation informs the LWIB chair, who follows the process agreed upon in section 13 of that local MOU for resolving disputes. If partners still cannot reach that agreement, then the individual responsible for reconciliation then informs Mike Baker at this email address. So you'll get this presentation after today, and this is also it's going to be out on the WIOA implementation page. Then the WIOA interagency work group will consider any justifications received and identify any steps. So that's what they're there to do, is to help. And then, of course, if required partner does not pay an amount owed within 60 calendar days of the end of the reconciliation period, the individual responsible for reconciliation requests a written justification from the delinquent payee as, why? Why haven't you paid this? And then again, that would, the individual responsible for reconciliation would then provide a report signed by the LWIB to Mike Baker with any justifications received, proposed solutions considered. And then the WIOA interagency work group would then step in and help identify the next steps to ensure the payment is made. Did you guys have any questions? I know that was a lot to go through, and I went through it probably pretty quickly. Just throw any questions that you might have out in the chat. I know we've gotten quite a bit of questions over the last 6 months, which brought us to creating this presentation. And maybe some of those we were able to answer one-on-one.
You can also raise your hand, your Zoom hand, and I can unmute you if you'd like to ask a question live. Okay, great. Thank you so much, everyone. We appreciate your time this morning. We'll go ahead and end early since it's 10:38. Nobody ever complains about us letting them out early, that's for sure. So thank you so much. And we will see you the following Wednesday for our next Workforce Wednesday webinar. We did add some new webinars out. So the marketing went out yesterday for that, but we also have them on our website. So be sure to check those out as well. Thank you, and everyone have a great rest of your Wednesday.